So, it's been almost a year since the Ahsoka show came out, and although it received a largely positive reception from the fans of the Clone Wars and Rebels, it didn't perform well at all and left many fans feeling left out of a bigger story. In this video, I'm going to take a closer look at the Ahsoka show's shortcomings and positives a year after it released to come to a conclusion on what Disney needs to do to avoid complete and total failure in their future projects and to ensure success. So be sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons for weekly awesome Star Wars content, and let's get straight into it. So to start things off, the elephant in the room is of course the required content to even understand the show. The show was created by Dave Filoni, one of the main people who worked on the Ahsoka character with George Lucas. He spent a decade at this point showing the character's growth and development, and he decided that he wanted the Ahsoka show to be the starting point to her final arc and greatest arc as a fully developed protagonist. Okay, in theory that sounds quite good. However, he decided to structure it in such a way that we're straight up thrown into the events as they were left off in the Star Wars Rebels show, an animated show from a decade before the Ahsoka show's release. This means that unless you've seen the show, you don't know who Ezra is, who Sabine and Ahsoka are because they've never been properly introduced, and you have no idea about Thrawn or why he'd even be such a big deal. If you'd seen all 75 episodes of Rebels, however, you'd know that all of these people, who they are, their characters, and understand the grave threat that Thrawn poses to the galaxy, rather than just being dumped a ton of exposition to say that he's so evil and horrifying. There's still a problem here, however, in that for you to be able to properly understand Ahsoka's story in Rebels and its significance, you also have to watch The Clone Wars, a show with 133 episodes. This is literally dozens of hours of content that you have to watch in order just to comprehend the basic plot of the Ahsoka show. It's basically a massive chain of dependencies. This brings me on to the second issue, however. Those hours you'd spend devouring Disney's back catalogue just to have enough lore to understand the show would be completely and utterly wasted because Ahsoka doesn't respect the value of that time commitment. I'm going to get into some spoilers here for Rebels and the Clone Wars, so if you haven't seen those, be warned. But throughout the Clone Wars, we see Ahsoka go from a whiny brat who doesn't care about others to being a well-educated young Jedi who respects others' lives and is careful with how she uses them. In Rebels, we see Ezra go through a similar journey from a borderline homeless thief to being an esteemed Jedi Knight in training, willing to make the ultimate sacrifice to save the galaxy, something he'd never have even considered doing before the show. All of this story and lore is completely wasted in the Ahsoka show. Ezra sacrificed himself purely to remove Thrawn from the chessboard and avoid the destruction of the rebellion. Whereas, thanks to the Ahsoka show, not only is Thrawn now loose again, but we're meant to believe that somehow Ezra just blended in and made a simple escape without any issues or detection. This is pathetic writing, and it really treats us fans like we're stupid. Ahsoka is far too joyful about her massive series of mistakes, leading to Thrawn entering the galaxy, and she's all too ready to spend the rest of her life in some magical mystery land, while the rebels could be demolished if Thrawn rose to power. And Sabine, don't even get me started. She went through a huge arc of character building in Rebels and would never have made the awful decisions, nor showed the immense weakness that she did over Ezra. Her being a simp pretty much cost the rebellion two of its biggest agents and unleashed a threat of unparalleled proportions to the New Republic. This is something I cannot stress enough. Sabine was literally a war hero who, despite being a child, had seen countless battles and killed many enemies. This is the gunfight and demolitions expert that we're meant to believe would risk the entire galaxy's safety in exchange for saving a person who would never even want to be saved and sacrificed himself for her sake as well as for the sake of the galaxy as a whole. This is the biggest backtrack on character development Filoni has ever done, and for him, that isn't an easy award to give. Some fans found Sabine's love to be touching, but the reality was that she spent years without him to think back on his sacrifice and ultimately decided his choice was invalid and that she needed to undo it. And not to mention, they pretty much made it out to be more of a friendship rather than a relationship, so that just makes it even worse. To avoid being fully negative though, let's think about some things that the show could have done to improve on these flaws. First of all, at the very least, we needed to open the show with a 5 to 15 minute flashback segment, pretty much showing us a lot of things from Rebels, maybe even the Clone Wars, just to build those relationships up for the fans who haven't seen all of the previous material. This would do a lot to benefit the show, and it could have had a few scenes showing how Thrawn was decimating the rebellion until Ezra boarded his ship and sacrificed himself to get out of the way. It'd show his crewmates and friends screaming at him to stay and abort his mission, but him closing his eyes and choosing to make the ultimate sacrifice. This would explain to people how deadly Thrawn was, but it would also properly convey the deep emotional connection between Ezra and his friends and why he means so much to them. We could also get some basic scenes showing what happened to Ahsoka and Sabine between Rebels and this show, not going into their training, but showing them try to fail and adapt at a new life without Ezra. We then have the build-up in place for the rest of the show to have a deep emotional payoff, even for regular fans, as well as catch them up on one of the few decades worth of in-universe lore in a matter of minutes. I also believe that it would have done the show a lot of good if Sabine had acted more in line with her Rebels self, rather than now being an adult and still acting like a child. Multiple major plot points of this show would have been handled completely differently if her angst for Ezra had been appropriately managed, and she and Ahsoka had open and honest conversations like adults, rather than a failed master and apprentice. Something Something I absolutely would have addressed and resolved is the weird sideline story of Sabine constantly avoiding Ezra's question about how she found him and knew where to look. Ezra would have never wanted or allowed her to risk quintillions of lives in the galaxy just to come and rescue him, especially not to betray Ahsoka. She knows this and chooses to simply not tell him anything and leave him clueless with absolutely no information. It almost seems like we'll never get this resolved since she kept brushing him off until they ended up in 2 different galaxies. This rubbed a lot of fans, including me, the wrong way, and if you're going to break someone else's exile purely out of greed while putting at risk everyone he sacrificed him for, you should have at least had the guts and heart to confront him and tell him that. As of right now, unless Hera tells him, he'll never know the awful decisions which Sabine made, and she may not get the chance to learn from these terrible mistakes and improve. Now, not everything is so horrific, however, and admittedly, there are some things about this show which were quite good. Although the minor benefits don't polish away the awful writing and structure, something undeniably good in this show is the costume design. All of the characters are wearing what you'd expect from them, especially Ahsoka once she loses her cloak, and Ezra's post-exile outfit. In case you didn't know, the chainmail armor he has under his robes are actually a large set of strung together stormtrooper dog tags, which he used to create makeshift armor plating. The costume design actually won an Emmy for their amazing work on this show, and unfortunately she received it after her death. She will not be forgotten, and she truly did a great job, and her skill and talent shine through, especially with Baylan's epic old knight aesthetic. I also fully believe, and I know many fans agree with me, that Eman Esfandi's portrayal of Ezra was pretty damn good. He portrays his charisma, anxiety, and jesting natures perfectly, while still presenting something new for Ezra's more master-like Jedi state, able to rely entirely on the Force with confidence, whereas a Padawan, it was still the thing which he struggled with the most. Elon Musk, Lars Mikkelsen gave a wonderful performance as Thrawn, with the same majestic and intimidating voice we know and love from Star Wars Rebels, although to be honest, I wish he was CGI, or at least done differently through practical work. The simple contact lenses and face paint don't really feel authentic, and it doesn't look the most professional, although his suit is impeccable, so I can let it slide, and the acting was great, and that's the main thing that matters. Along with the writing, of course, which was terrible, but it's fine. The obvious thing which most fans adored is the Clone Wars flashbacks, especially seeing Rex looking amazing in live action for the first time, all of the clones, the battle, and of course, Anakin Skywalker himself. Hayden Christensen coming back for this show was a massive pulling point for lots of fans, including myself. You can never get enough of Hayden, but his portrayal here is just great. Unfortunately, it seems by the ratings that this is the only episode that people actually watched and came back to, but he was cold and calculating, able to continue teaching Ahsoka even after his death. We see the flash of Vader, the fallen Jedi Knight turned agent of evil, and the show ends with us seeing the redeemed Jedi Force Ghost looking joyfully at Ahsoka, proud of her progress. All of this was amazing, especially the little callback to his fight against her as Vader in Rebels when he said, "I've heard that line before." So, as you can tell, the show is very mixed for me, leaning much more towards bad than it was towards good, but that's fine because hopefully season 2 and the future Heir to the Empire movie will address a lot of these issues and ultimately make the show a much better piece of art than its first season. We've had leaked casting calls for the mother, Abeloth from Mortis, which is the representation of chaos, whereas the father is the representation of order, the son is the representation of dark, and the daughter is the representation of light. And there could be so much stuff going on between light and dark, Ahsoka and Sabine rejoining Ezra in his fight against Thrawn. There's so much that could happen. Baylan Skoll, with that recast, it's going to be pretty difficult, but I still think he was one of the best parts of the show, and let's see what he does with it in season 2, whoever gets chosen to play Baylan Skoll. So do you guys agree with my points here? Do you love the show? Do you think it wasn't great? Do you hate it entirely? Excited for season 2 and the movie? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more awesome Star Wars content. If you made it this far, drop a thank Mr. Ezra in the comments down below.